Hello, everyone. This is the Out of the Trenches 200th episode live stream. I am joined by some special guests today. These are all authors, part of the Road to Awesome family. I'll start off by introducing Dan Wolf. Dan is an assistant principal at Sunray Elementary in Pasco County, Florida. He's the author of Becoming the Change: Five Essential Elements to Becoming Your Best Self, which was published in June of 2022. His principles are to serve, lead, and inspire. For more information on Dan, his book, blog, podcast, and other podcasts he has been on, please go to becomingthechange.com/8258-2. My next guest is Ashley Hubner. Ashley is the ed consultant who builds instructional effectiveness with districts. She's the author of Foundations of Instructional Coaching, Impact People, Improve Instruction, and Increase Success, which was published in September of 2022. Dr. Darrin Peppard is the author of Road to Awesome, which was published in July of 2020. He is a former principal and superintendent, now leadership speaker and consultant, who coaches leaders in improving their school culture and climate, as well as growing dynamic leaders. Um, Debbie Tannenbaum was unable to attend due to illness today, but I wanted to just refer to her. She is also a Road to Awesome author of Transform Tech Notes to Make Learning Sticky, which was published in May of 2021. And she speaks a lot on incorporating ed tech into your school and classroom. And Melissa Wright will be joining us in a few minutes. And I'll go ahead and introduce her now because she'll be just kind of coming on in. Melissa is a high school math and dance teacher in New Brunswick, Canada. She was inducted into the Jostens Renaissance Hall of Fame this past summer, and she is the author of Inspired Moments That Matter, published in July of 2022. Well, welcome to the live stream, everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, so I was thinking of a topic and who to have on for my live stream event. I did, one for my 50th episode and one for my 100th episode. And it was fitting to do one with Road to Awesome authors because I will soon become a published author myself. My book should be out in a few weeks. We're doing the last minute touches. We'll talk about that a little bit. I have a few questions for Darrin at the end, talking about the ed publishing business. But I have some questions. Everybody can kind of jump in as they feel. Since I am not yet the published author, but I have that experience of going through the process up to the final piece. My first question is basically about getting your first book published. How did the process look for each of you? So I know, Darrin, you published with Codebreaker before you started Road to Awesome. And your book, Road to Awesome, was based on experiences as a principal. So maybe if you want to start off with kind of when you wrote your story versus kind of getting it published. I know you talked a little bit about that on my podcast a few years ago. But,
Yeah, for sure. I was actually trying to remember which episode it was that I was on. I mean, I know it was a while back, and I think it was in late 2020 or early 2021, one of the two.
Yeah.
But so it's interesting. When I wrote Road to Awesome, I had honestly, in July of 2017, I started as a superintendent. So I left my principalship and became a superintendent. Just a couple of months before that, I had walked across the stage and, was hooded with my doctorate degree. And all I could think, Dana, was, after that dissertation, I am never writing another thing ever again. I want nothing to do with that. And it was like 6 months later, and I started, kind of trying to write a book. And I'm like, God, I just really want to write a book. And fortunately for me, I went through, I think, what a lot of authors go through, which is kind of that start and stop process. And you think, oh, it's got to be this. And you struggle with the imposter syndrome of why in the world would anybody want to read something I wrote and that kind of thing. And, finally somebody just said, hey, just tell your stories. All of us have stories. And I know you guys have all heard me say that to you. Tell your stories, because that's just so critical. But that got the ball rolling for me and got the book to where I wanted it. And I had actually met with a different publisher really thought that's where it was going to go. Things were just kind of dragging. And that's when I made the connection with Codebreaker, and it all happened very fast once I landed with Codebreaker. It was, I think, May of 20 when we signed the contract, and the book was live July 1st of 2020. It was really quick. I think I just came in at the right time, that they didn't have another book yet in the editing queue, and mine was finished. So it moved quick. It really did. And it was a whirlwind experience, as I know you guys are all well aware of that. Once you know you're going to actually be a published author, and then, here comes the process, and before you know it, it's out there in the world.
So, Darrin, you had actually been writing that book over a period of a few years before you then submitted it to Codebreaker.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a long, drawn out process, without question, and it was just interesting how quickly it moved from, continuing to write, meeting with the first publisher, and then, just overnight from meeting with the Codebreaker folks to the next day, having a contract, and then 6 weeks later the book was actually out there in the space. It was pretty amazing. The whole process was interesting, and I think everybody has their own unique experience. So definitely the three authors that are on the screen now that Melissa has joined us, definitely have their own experience, as do you too.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So anybody else who would like to jump in and talk kind of about their experience writing the manuscript, and then kind of looking for a publisher, or kind of how that process looked for you?
I can go ahead and share. So for my experience and everything, the writing of my book, Becoming the Change, first started through a blog that I had started, and from there, the pandemic happened. And when I wasn't on Zoom or anything, I said, now is more, what better time to go ahead and to do what I've always dreamed of doing, and writing my book, and like Darrin said, telling my story through Becoming the Change. So when I was able to write the book, the writing part it just kind of flowed for me. The hardest part was having someone take a chance on me, and I'll forever be grateful to Darrin, Jess, and the Road to Awesome family for taking that chance on me. I had over probably 50 rejections. At the time, I just put it out to anybody. And it just so happened I was on Twitter one day, and I happened to see a post from Darrin, and they had just signed another author to the Road to Awesome family. I said, let me go ahead and check things out. So I went to their website, and went ahead, and I said, let me go ahead and throw my pitch out there. And Darrin emailed me back, and the whole process from there started. And then eventually, I said, if it was meant to be, it was meant to be. And a couple of days later, I was offered a contract, and was just overjoyed. And just, I believe everything happens for a reason, and the stars just aligned. And I definitely learned so much through the process. I know so much more now than I knew before. He and Jess guided me every step of the way throughout, from the beginning of the process to getting published, and even helping me find ways to go ahead and self-promote myself through contacts that Darrin had for podcasts, things like that. So to date right now, I've been on probably about 16 podcasts. Still have a couple more in the works right now, because I'm leaving no stone unturned. That's, this, who knows what the future will hold. This will be my one and only chance going through this process, and I want to make the most of it. So
I really like that piece about, you don't know if you're going to write another book. So really get out there, promote yourself. And the fact is that you didn't give up. You had 50 rejections, and you stumbled kind of upon Darrin's tweet online, and took the chance. So Ashley or Melissa, if either one of you would like to step in and talk kind of about getting your book from manuscript to getting a contract to get it published.
Well, for me, to be 100% honest with you, because I'm a math teacher, after I did my master's degree, I thought I'd never, ever write another paper or anything that was quite long again. But my process really for writing started through COVID. So over COVID, when we were home, I started writing a book, and I believe Darrin, we had kind of maybe chatted about that a little bit on the side as I was writing, because Darrin was going through the process with Codebreaker with his book. And, and it took many different turns throughout COVID, and it's actually almost completely different than it was when I first started it. So it was neat to see the evolution of it from what I had thought it would be to what actually it became in the end. So I believe it was around Christmas time was it 2020, Darrin, I believe, or was it 2021? Time all blurs together to me.
It's a really good question.
But Darrin had reached out to me because when he decided to start Road to Awesome, because he knew I was in the process and he wanted to have a look at what I was working on. So I sent it over to them after I had done a little bit more writing, and then I was so lucky that Darrin and Jess offered me a contract on my book. And I actually, when I submitted it, it wasn't a complete book. And I think that's something, that people think sometimes that they have to have a fully written book in order to submit it, but you don't, right? You need, have a pitch and where you want to go, a chapter or two written, so they can see where the book is going. And, I think that conversation piece with the publisher. So like with Darrin and Jess, they're very good about jumping on a Zoom call to chat things over. So they know where your direction is going with the book and can help guide you as well. So for me, I actually it was probably about a year and a half after the contract was signed until it was actually published. Because like I said, the book changed quite a bit, even changed titles from what we originally thought it was going to be, which I'm really happy with. I love the title of it. And I think it really encompasses who I am, and Darrin and Jess were fabulous throughout the whole process of, taking it from what I want it to be to where it is now. And I think too, that they really saw who I am and wanted to bring that out in the book, and were really great to work with in that respect. So like Dan, I don't know if I'll ever write another book, but I'm just, writing out this experience and trying to take it all in.
Yeah, your process was a little bit like mine, Melissa, and the fact that, I reached out to Darrin. I didn't have a completed manuscript. It was shortly after Debbie had published her book, and Darrin had launched Road to Awesome. And, I'd seen Robert Breyer's book as well and read that. And, really thought, I had something to share as well. So I kind of did the same thing and shared a few chapters and an idea. And then, it took, I signed a contract in August of 21. And so, my book will launch next month. So it's taken about as long almost. So Ashley, how did you kind of find Road to Awesome?
Well, one, I didn't get the memo that you didn't have to have the whole book written. So mine was fully written. But I went through kind of a huge life change. We moved from Texas to Florida, and I was leaving public education in the same area that I had worked for 14 years and moving to a new state, and I knew nobody, and I was having to get my certification switched over and all of those things. And I ended up not going back into the classroom or into public education. And so I was trying to figure out, what was I going to do with my life? And I was an instructional coach the longest amount of time that I worked in the school district. And that's really where my heart was for instructional coaches who were thrown into a role like me and had no idea what they were supposed to be doing. So that was kind of how I got the job. They said, go coach. There was no guidance or expectation. There was no role clarity. I didn't know what a coaching cycle was. And so I had to navigate all of those things on my own, do my own professional learning, and try to figure that out along the way. So I decided in my time of trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life to write a book. And I wanted to dedicate it to instructional coaches that had the same journey as me. And because I did that role for 7 years, and really I'm still doing that role in a different capacity. I do it more with consulting and Zoom and virtual things. But I felt like I had a lot of expertise and guidance that I could offer to new coaches who were thrown into that role. And so that's basically what my book is about, is just trying to figure out what an instructional coach does, how to build those relationships and navigate working with adults, especially for those who just came out of the classroom and transitioning from working with students to adults, and how to lead the professional development and all of those things. So that was a lot of advice in my book. But so long story short, I wrote the book over probably about a month. I think I just sat down and wrote every day because I had nothing else to do. And so I somehow got in connection with some people who were doing some live StreamYard podcasts like this. And they started having me on regularly to just talk about instruction and curriculum. And through that, I met Jillian DuBois, and we became really good friends. And she was like, you know what? I think your book would be really good to Road to Awesome. Why don't you reach out to Darrin? And so I did, and we met and we talked. And he kind of said the same thing. He was like, well, I don't need a whole book. Like, I just need a synopsis and a couple of chapters, and let's look at it and see. And I was like, well, it's already written, so I'm going to throw it to you. But we did, he signed a contract with me, and I was very excited about that. We did change it along the way, though. As we got into the revision process, Jess would come back and say, I need, to know more about this, or can you add to this story? And then it transitioned into just a book that was about my journey, but more to like a guidance for coaches. So there's a lot of self-reflection. There's questions in there for them to answer and document through. And so I think that it helps them. It's kind of like a toolkit now than just a book about my journey.
Yeah, and that's kind of how my books turned out as well. I do offer tips for educators who find themselves in the trenches and how to stay out of the trenches, and tie in my stories and other stories from podcast guests. And like both of you have mentioned, kind of revising several pieces and going in different directions with some pieces of the book. So everybody has a different story, kind of how they stumbled upon getting their book published. I also wanted to talk about kind of the promo piece, marketing piece. As educators, I don't feel like I'm really somebody who's great at marketing. I know it does take a lot of marketing when you have a podcast, and I'm learning kind of as I go. But I know, Ashley, your book was published about 2 months ago. For those who've had their book published for a while, what are some of your takeaways from the book launch and the initial getting it out there, and then anything that you would have done differently in terms of promoting the book, or things that you still want to do to help promote it, even if it's been out for a while?
I'll go ahead and jump right in. So like I mentioned a little bit earlier, one of the things through the promotional for mine is I've been on about 16 podcasts right now, and I'm still emailing multiple, whether it's educational podcasts or just podcasts in general. I mean, I'm reaching for the moon, just in regards to it, because of the topic I wrote about. I think it's essential for any person that wants to become the best person they can possibly be. And so I did a lot of that. I also learned through both Darrin and Lainey Rowell and Canva, and using that as a promotional tool within there. So I've used that a lot, pulling excerpts out of the book that I wrote, using all the different praise pieces that I had people write on the book, and then also any of the Amazon reviews. And what I've done is I've kind of just had every other day, I'm putting a new post out there on the different things, whether it's Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, just putting it out there with the link to my book, anything within there, just to get it out there. So it's always on the forefront of somebody's mind, and eventually it'll fall into somebody's feed, and just asking other, friends and fellow coworkers, anybody that's bought the book or anything to help promote it any way that they can. And like I said, it's been almost about 6 months out, but like I said, I want to, it's a topic that's always going to be relevant because you're always wanting to improve yourself. And that's what I'll keep on doing with it. As far as anything that I would change, to be honest, I don't know if there's anything I would, because I knew going into this that I wanted to pull out all the stops, and I think I have. I can confidently say that in everything I've done. Reached out to such legendary people as like George Raveling, who helped coach Michael Jordan and things like that. And the book was even one of the 5 recommendations within his newsletter. And that's, he's got a lot of subscriptions of people that subscribe to that. And just like I said, those are the things that I wanted to do. And even if I get a rejection, thanks, it just won't fit our podcast format, at least I gave it a go. And that's all that I can look at and be that role model for my own daughter, who's, early on in her, going to be graduating college soon. So, but yeah.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, it's all about putting yourself out there, right, and continuing to do so. I like the piece about Canva. I've made graphics like for this episode today on Canva, and that's just an easy way to kind of pull, those praise pieces, pull excerpts from the book, promote it, and you can make those all in bulk, right, and just put them out as you see fit on social media. Melissa, I know your book's been out about 7 months now. Kind of what did you do initially to promote it, and is there anything you'd change?
Well, when it was before it came out, because my book came out in July, I was doing similar to Dan, taking quotes from the book and doing them up in Canva images. And, I started doing those before we had a solid cover design. So those actually kind of influenced the direction we went for the cover design, which was really neat. But having those out there before the book even launches, I think is important, because it gives people an insight as to a little bit about what the book is about, right? And then you can also, because a big thing to remember, which Darrin has taught me many times, not everybody sees all of your posts, right? So it is okay to reuse those things. Sometimes we think that when we're promoting stuff, we have to have new stuff every time, but we can reuse those because people don't see everything. One thing that I thought was really great about when my book launched, we did a call similar to this, and I had some people that had previewed my book as part of the book launch, which was really fun to hear their perspectives on the book in person and to have them there as the first official kickoff for my book. So I don't think there's really anything that I would change, but continually to promote the book is something that needs to be done, and I need to find a better balance in just teaching full time and doing lots of other stuff and having a family. But it's something that you're always thinking about. And really the neat thing is too, because I know originally in my book, I was, targeting educators, but there's been many people that are non-educators that have read my book as well and have said very, nice things about it. So I think, we also have to sometimes remember too, that when we're promoting this, to not, like Dan said, not only promote it to the education space, but to think outside of that box and promote it everywhere.
Yeah, and I think like my book as well, it can be something that's, stories of resilience, like that can go across many businesses. And you just gave me the idea to kind of put a couple of quotes out there, perhaps, in the upcoming weeks to promote. Ashley, how about you? I know you reached out to me to be on my podcast, and my episode with you in September will launch soon. It hasn't launched yet, but I know you were on several other podcasts as well around the time of your book launch. So what did you do? What are you still doing? What could you maybe done differently?
Yeah, so I definitely reached out to my community to ask them, how can I do this? What can I do? I knew people who had podcasts, and then Darrin gave me a lot of references as well to reach out to. So started those, and then in the middle of that, I lived through the hurricane that hit Florida. And so I had to reschedule a bunch. So still working on those. I was just recently on the Beer EDU podcast right after Dan. And so it was funny because they talked about you in our podcast because we have a lot of similarities. And I was like, oh yeah. And so, that episode should be coming out soon. I thought it was this week, but so doing the podcast, like I said, I really have reached out to my community too. I have a lot of people in the edupreneur space that have connections to many other people. I'm in a lot of Facebook groups too that are just for instructional coaches. So I promote within there. And anytime I see like a coach that's struggling or has questions, I automatically like throw my book in there and I say, chapter 4, read it, girl. It's going to help you. So using those platforms as well. Of course, I'm doing the social media. And then last night I launched a virtual book study. And so it was free to anyone who bought the book and joined my Facebook group that I have that's called Confessions of a Coach. And I had about 15 people sign up. And so we met last night for the first time to talk through the intro and chapter 1 of my book, which is about building relationships. And it was really good because we really just got to have some of those nitty gritty conversations about what does it look like on your campus? What does it look like in your district? And we all gave each other like advice and helped each other through these struggling relationships, reluctant teachers that they're working with. And we just came together as a community. So that was really awesome. And so that's going to continue over the next 4 to 6 weeks. So I can see myself doing that again for sure. I hope that other people hear about the book study and then want to go buy the book and join in as well. I've talked to a couple of districts who have bought it for their coaches who I've offered, I can come anytime and come to a meeting or do a virtual Zoom and talk to them and do a session, or we can do a book study together. So I've been trying to promote that as an option as well.
Yeah, and I remember us talking about on my podcast, you launching that book study. So congrats that it is now launched just as of yesterday. So yeah, I hope a lot of people will tune in, and like it's really exciting to hear that districts are buying that for their coaches. Darrin, when you first got your book published with Codebreaker, it was kind of a whirlwind, as you said, and that was kind of in the middle of the pandemic, and I remember kind of hearing about you through Brandon Beck, and then buying your book because he recommended reading your story so highly. But how did you end up promoting your book? Because you were working as a full-time superintendent at the time,
right?
And during the COVID shutdown too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it wasn't just working as a superintendent. It was like I don't know, running public health, and I wasn't running public health. We had great people running public health. I don't want that to come off wrong, but learning about I learned more about viruses, and I was a science major, but I learned more about virology. Man, during that first year of the pandemic, man, it was crazy. But no, for me, I mean, obviously a lot of the things that, that Dan and Melissa and Ashley have talked about with being on podcasts and those types of things. But for me, another element to it was actually getting out and speaking, at conferences. And obviously that first year and a half the book was out, most of it was virtual. And so honestly, I mean, I keynoted a handful of conferences from my home office. I spoke at a whole bunch of conferences and did breakouts from either my work office or my home office, that kind of thing. So, that's something that I think a lot of times authors miss that piece, that, you're going to go to a conference, put out a proposal and, turn your book into a workshop, or turn your book into a keynote. When we publish a book, as individuals, or like even us, as a publishing company, you're going to talk about that book for at least the next 2 years. And it's interesting. I'll be honest with you. It's a little bit of a side note, but it's interesting listening to Dan, to Ashley, and to Melissa, and listening to them on the podcast. Yes, I do listen to you guys. And what I love is each opportunity that they speak, and I know this is true of me speaking about RTA, every time you get to do it, you get a little bit more clear and a little bit more clear and a little bit more clear, and your message just becomes so sharp. And that's as much a part of the marketing as anything. When you first start, you're like, I don't even know what stories to tell from the book when I'm on a podcast or something like that. I think one of the first ones I did, Ashley and Dan were just talking about it, the Beer EDU podcast with Kyle and Ben. I know we talk more about beer than we did about the book, which altogether isn't a bad thing. But, obviously the idea is to try and promote the book. But certainly, the podcast circuit is huge for me now. Of course, having a podcast, I don't talk about my book, but obviously it's an easy link to what I do. But the other thing too, and this is something I've had conversations with a handful of authors, and definitely, we'll have conversations with you guys if we haven't already, about having your website and about, doing everything you can when you're putting those things on social media, when you're putting those promos out there to try and drive traffic to your website. Because then it's an opportunity, one, to collect email addresses, and two, for them to see your book, and say, oh man, I love what I hear from Dana on Out of the Trenches. Now I'm on her website and I see she has a book. Hey, I'd like to check that out. Or even having, like a small excerpt of your book on your website as a, hey, click on this. I was on with Dr. Michael Nagler earlier today. He and I will be presenting together at the New York Superintendent's Conference in March. I'm going to be keynoting that conference, and we're going to do a breakout session together, like from idea to published. That's what we're going to talk about. And Mike and I discussed, let's take the intro of your book, put it on your website, and when people go and click on it, then they can get a 10% off coupon and buy it on your website. This is something that I think a lot of people who go into publishing a book don't realize. Yes, you're going to sell them on Amazon, and that's great. It's so cool. You guys all got to experience this, and Dana, you will too. Seeing that, number one new release or bestseller or whatever banner, that's great. But you also want to be selling them on your website. And I think that was something early on that I sold autographed copies, but I mean, it was like family and friends that were buying the autographed copies. Now I still do that, but the more you sell your book on your website, it just allows people to learn more about you and to learn more about your content. And like in Ashley's case, where, she's doing this work full time and doing some brilliant work around the country, supporting instructional coaches, it's an opportunity to take that book and honestly turn it into a really cool business card. You want to know about Ashley, check out that book. And those are some of the things I think I've learned in terms of marketing the book. I'll give away copies of the book, simply because, somebody will say, I think my principal would really love to have you come and speak at our school. What can I tell him about you? Here's my book. Give him the book. It's everything he needs to know about me right there. And it seems to work really well. And I mean, we're actually in a unique space. I don't think I've told any of you guys this yet, but we actually have reacquired the rights to my book, and we will be re-releasing it as an updated edition here just a little bit down the road. So we're grateful for everything with Codebreaker and them helping us, bring that book to life. But now it's going to be an RTA family book, and we'll be releasing an updated second edition. So we'll get an opportunity, Dana, to redo some of those things, I guess.
Yeah. I remember us connecting at the Teach Better conference, and you mentioning that, and like you said, maybe putting a reflection piece in a little bit of kind of what you've learned since publishing the book, and having that opportunity to move it over to your own publishing company. That's really exciting. I did want to ask Darrin. So you published with Codebreaker, and then you launched your book in the fall or in July of 2020, and then you launched Road to Awesome about 9 months later. So was that something you kind of thought about as your book was getting published, or how did you get kind of interested in educational publishing?
It's interesting. Before I actually connected with Codebreaker, I actually considered self-publishing my book. And again, it was, I was working with had communication with another publisher, wonderful people. I won't say a single bad word about them, but I felt like I should know something by now. This is taking too long. And then started thinking, well, maybe I'll self-publish. And then, of course, the opportunity with Codebreaker came along, and I'm grateful for that. And partway, I don't know, maybe the book was maybe 4 months old. And that's when the team at Codebreaker had reached out and said, hey, you ought to think about maybe starting your own, and we'll kind of help you get started, which they did. And I'm so grateful for that. They really helped us learn along the way. And for us, let's see, it's got to be about 18 months ago, roughly. I was kind of reaching that point. I was actually talking with somebody on an episode I recorded for my podcast, Dr. Larry Dake. He and I were talking about this earlier today. I think that's like a January release. But there was a point for me in my superintendency late in that last year that I was there where I was like, okay, I have to do something different. It was really kind of starting to just really pull it out of me. And we had already launched the publishing side, and we thought this is another opportunity to help bring incredible people like Ashley and Dan and Melissa and you and so many other, wonderful authors that we work with to help bring their stories to life. There's great publishers out there, but they're all busy. They're all busy, and everybody's got a great story that needs to be told. So we thought it was an opportunity for us to, kind of step into that space. And I'm just really, really blessed. I know I've told all of you guys this, that my wife, Jess, has this unbelievable skill set around being the editor, being the art director, and the one who does all of that backside work to doing the books. It's been amazing. It really has. And so, it started as kind of a, hey, let's do this. This sounds like this could be a great thing for us, to now Road to Awesome is a full-time job for both of us, between the publishing, the leadership coaching and consulting, and of course the speaking that I do, all over the country. So I don't know, I guess it was just one of those things that was in our heads, and we had talked about it, but then when the opportunity came, we're like, you know what, let's jump on this. And then again, when it was, hey, we can go do this full time, it was, full steam ahead.
Well, tell me, Darrin, a little bit about how you and Jessica tag team, kind of in getting books edited, the covers out. I know I get emails from both of you, and your name's on a lot of the Google Docs, and I know they're coming from Jess, so it's hard to know.
Right? Yeah. That's not me. That's her. Yeah. That's a great question. So from idea to published, I'll just do it as quickly as I can. Ideas come to me. Usually people, I had two different people pitch books today, just short Zoom calls, conversations, tell me what your ideas are. And obviously I want to know not just what is your idea, but what are your goals? What are your goals for the reader? What do you want your reader to be able to do? You guys have heard me say it a lot. A great book is like a great speech. It should make you think, it should touch your heart, and it should make you do something. And so I want to hear those things when I'm talking with people who bring the idea forward. We always ask for, except in Ashley's case, can you give us, a chapter or so or something like that. We actually, just before I came on, I was on with another, I guess no longer prospective author. I just offered a contract. I can't tell you who, he hasn't signed it yet, but it's awesome. And his is done too. But from that point where we get the document, or the concept document, outline, maybe, a chapter or two, that's when Jess and I are then sitting down. We're going to go through it separately. We're going to come together, compare notes, talk about, where do we see this project? Where do we see it fitting into our timeline? And does it fit who we are? As an RTA family. I mean, it's no longer just about me and Jess. We're not the only RTA family. So we want to make sure we're looking at projects that aren't going to work, against Melissa's project or, contradict Dan's project or something like that. We want to make sure that they fit, kind of that footprint that we're starting to create. Once we've put the book under contract, when it's finished, it goes into our editing queue, as you guys all know. We just work through, who got in there first and kind of work our way through it. I think right now we're about 9 deep in the editing queue and probably have 8 or 10 people who are writing currently. So it's almost like a drag race for those people who are out there like, okay, I got to get that 10th spot. You guys get that too, I want to be ahead of, whomever. So, then it's dive into the document. We're wanting to, do that kind of early read. We'll both do an early read. And then once it's really getting deep into editing, it's mostly Jess. there'll be some times where she's like, okay, I need you to go through this with me now before I send it back to the author. When we get to where we are with yours, Dana, she and I are in it every day. We have both, she's actually been pre-making most of Thanksgiving dinner today, but we have been in your book a couple of times today, and I'm sure we'll take tomorrow off, but probably Friday we'll be back in it. And then when it comes to building the book, that's her. And that's all her. The cover stuff is primarily driven by her. I mean, we'll collaborate on that, and we'll talk about different ideas. Everybody comes with different ideas. I love how Melissa talked about kind of going from her social posts to the actual cover of Inspired was, pardon the pun, inspired by some of the artwork she had done with Canva and taking colors from that. So we definitely tag team a lot and collaborate on it. But once the book's in editing, that is really where Jess is doing a lot of the heavy lifting.
Yeah, and it's something that you've kind of learned as you've gone along for a little over the past year since you left the superintendency and have been doing this full time. And now I could tell your list of contracted authors and people in the queue is really growing. So yeah, congratulations on that. Yeah. I'd like to give everybody a chance to speak a little bit more as we kind of wrap up today, and just thoughts of what you'd like listeners to remember, something that you wanted to point out maybe from your book, or something you might not have mentioned on your previous recording on the Out of the Trenches podcast. We'll start with you, Dan.
All right. So again, name of my book is Becoming the Change, 5 Essential Elements to Being Your Best Self. And it's focused on the elements of social emotional learning. And as we all know in education, we have a million acronyms. It's also known as SEL. And it focuses on self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. And it's a book that has a self-assessment that you can take time and time again, because where you are today will be different 6 months from now, 6 years from now. And we're always evolving and trying to become our best self. On the cover of it is the image of a butterfly, because just like a caterpillar does its metamorphosis into a butterfly, we become the change as our own in our own lives and becoming the best people that we can become. So it's definitely something that I hope your listeners would definitely check it out. And again, like I had mentioned before, I'll forever be grateful to the Road to Awesome family for taking the chance on me. I know, I don't know if I've got other books. I've got other ideas in me. I've written over 800 blogs right now for my Becoming the Change blog on the 5 areas. So I've always thought about turning that into a possible, book for every day of the year, just on the different areas. Also, I think in education, I think we're in a crossroads. So I think also ideas of always remembering our why we do what we do. I've been in it 26 years, and I remind myself of what that why is every day. Just like you had mentioned, Dana, in the beginning, I live by 3 things: serve, lead, and inspire. And but let me go ahead and turn it over to either Ashley or Melissa.
Yeah, sure. So I'll go next. My book is called Inspired Moments That Matter. And it really is my journey as an educator from my very first year of teaching till where I am now. And within that is, stories interwoven. And a lot of it has to do with school culture and climate and the relationships that I've built along the way, because that has really inspired me and influenced the educator that I am today, but as well has influenced my life outside the classroom as well. So I really hope that when people read it, that they can see themselves in the stories and see that, that they do have these moments in their life that they might not realize at the time, but they are impacting them. And it may be a moment that at the time is maybe not the most positive moment, but it could, change their trajectory or someone else's trajectory and make all the difference in their life. And, for me, I've had many of those throughout my life. And one of my biggest inspirations that I talk about in that book is my mom, and how she helped shape who I am today and the educator that I am. And, I hope people read at least that chapter, which is the last chapter in the book, and find someone that they have in their life that has inspired them. And, I challenge you, if you do, pick up the phone, send them a text, email, call them, write a note to tell that person, especially now, because it's the American Thanksgiving this weekend, tell that person how grateful you are for them. And just like, I'm very grateful for Darrin and Jess and all that they do for me and the Road to Awesome family throughout, the year. And so, if you'd like to check it out, my website is just melissawright.ca.
All right. So my book is called Foundations of Instructional Coaching, Impact People, Improve Instruction, and Increase Success. And the reason it has those subtitles of Impact People, Improve Instruction, and Increase Success is because, just like in the classroom environment, if you don't have the relationships and the foundation, and just like Melissa and Dan talked about, the culture in the classroom, the kids aren't going to learn. So it's the same thing with adults. And so that's why my book starts with building relationships as the first chapter, because everything that follows is founded on understanding the people that you work with, knowing your teachers, and taking every moment and using it in the best way that you can impact them to help them move so that they can move students. And so that's kind of my whole premise of my book, is you build these foundational relationships, you use every moment that counts, you navigate through the hard ones, you work through the reluctant ones, and then you ultimately help them improve instruction in the classroom. You help them feel more confident as teachers, so then they can have, I say, a happy, what's the saying? A happy wife makes a happy life. A happy teacher makes a happy classroom. And so if they're happy and they feel confident, then their students feel happy and confident in the classroom, and then instruction can improve, and that ultimately increases success for both the students and the teacher. And so that's kind of the whole journey through my book is, how do you start with those relationships and then have that filter into the classroom and affect the students? And I'm at coachingaccess.net. So you can find information about me and any of the professional development I do, the book study, anything like that on my website underneath the services tab. I also have lots of free resources on there for instructional coaches, administrators, and classroom teachers. So,
Dan, could you also mention your tag and also your website?
Sure. So my tag for Twitter is @serve_lead_inspire, and with serve, it's without the E. It's not because I can't spell. It's just I'm limited to the number of characters on Twitter. So I just want to put that disclaimer out there. And then becomingthechange.com is where my blog and information on myself and the book and everything. It's on Amazon. So definitely check it out. And thank you so much for this opportunity of being on with everybody. It's been great.
It's been great having you all on as well. And Darrin, if you can mention where to find you online and your tags.
Of course, yeah. So before I do that, it's something that needs to be said, and I didn't mean to leave this out, but we were talking about my main book. The first book that we ever published at Road to Awesome was a kid's book. Road to Awesome, Journey for Kids, that I co-authored with Jillian Du Bois. Jillian, of course, was the illustrator. She's also been the illustrator for Kim Colazzo's book that we have, Emerson Blake and the Spotted Salamander. We've had so many incredible authors, that are part of this family. And I will be honest with you, when I left my principal role to be a superintendent, it was because I wanted to be able to grow more leaders. When I left my superintendent role, because I didn't get to grow leaders there, by the way, superintendents don't have time for that. It was, I want to grow more leaders. I want to be able to impact people. And every single author at Road to Awesome, I feel like we've had a tiny little slice in watching them, grow as authors and grow as entrepreneurs like Ashley is, and just putting themselves out in the world. And it gives me unbelievable pride to be I guess the leader of the Road to Awesome family, but just simply to be a part of this incredible network of people, all of you and all of those other authors that we don't have on here today. But so I just wanted to make sure and say that I'm so doggone proud of every one of you, and I learned so much from you, and I learned so much about you. Dan, I haven't got to meet you in person yet. The others on the screen here, Melissa and I have actually met in person several times, but I did finally get to meet Ashley and Dana in person last month. So we'll make that happen, my friend. I promise. So
absolutely.
But yeah, so to find me, everything we do on social media is Darrin and Peppard. So I mean that's right there on the screen. The website is roadtoawesome.net. You can learn everything you want to learn about us on the website. Of course, the podcast is Leaning into Leadership. And tags, of course, everything I tag, of course, is Road to Awesome, # Road to Awesome.
Well, I thank all of you for spending time today on the day before Thanksgiving to join me for this live event to celebrate my 200th episode. It's been a pleasure speaking with all of you about your journey to publishing, and I hope you tune in soon for my book launch in a few weeks. And, I'm excited to be among the published authors of the Road to Awesome family soon.
Congratulations on 200, Dana. That's an amazing accomplishment.
Thank you.